Hello, Chaplain Dell here. I'm going to do a little video today called The Root of Sexism. And basically, it's a historical overview of what I've learned in my life, and as opposed to, I should say, the changes that I've seen taking place just within my lifetime. With my grandfather's generation and my father's generation, I'm going to talk about the roles of men as opposed to the roles of women and the household. Now, we've all heard said that a woman's place is in the house, which just sounds horribly sexist. And I'm going to give an overview as to why that concept even exists today. It all goes back to the biblical creation of man in the Garden of Eden in the book of Genesis. When we read about God creating the earth, we read on the sixth day that he created man. Now, of course, the animals were already created, and Adam was given the authority to name those animals, which shows that man has authority over the creation of all of the creation. So we're really talking about authorities here. But there was not found a suitable companion for Adam, and so God caused a sleep to come on Adam and removed his rib and wove out of him a woman, woven out of man. Adam, incidentally, the Greek word of that is edema, meaning red earth or red clay. Okay, so the whole Judeo-Christian principle of the foundation of the order of God is found from Genesis on up, and this order has never changed. God's ordained order has really never changed, except that as people get further and further away from those type of teachings, then the culture changes around us. Now, my mom instructed me in my youth with the values that I hold today, the cultural values and the Christian values that I hold as a man of God. She was a woman's Bible teacher. She taught me right from wrong. She taught me to be responsible. She taught me to be protective of women, and respective of women. Now, as I went out on my own, I found that a lot of women today in my lifetime were in utter rebellion of those type of 1950 values, if you will, that I was taught when I was growing up. So this was a challenge even for myself in deciding the values that I would hold near and dear. So this is a very personal video on my perspective on how things have changed. Now, my father, who was the provider for my household and the protector of my household, he was in the Army, of course. Most back in the day, most of your men were in the military. It was considered a duty for them to do some military service in the country and the protection of their families and many families and the whole culture in general. And of course, this has evolved into a totally different thing to which we see today. And the same with my grandfather and my great-grandfather before him and on back into the foundations of the United States and before. So really, it's only been in this generation that I've seen these drastic changes taking place with different liberation, if you will, movements. Being as a man is told to take responsibility for his household and be the protector and the provider of his household, biblically, a woman would take that man's name. Now, this is traditional for the Western culture. Always has been traditional, but yet today we even see the abbreviations for women, and the hyphenated names, if you will, being used in the spirit of cultural diversity to so there's a change there. I'm not going to say it's a negative thing, but it's definitely a historical change, which I want to note. A a daughter was to be protected and provided for her father before she was given in her hand in marriage to the husband, and the two became one flesh. And then at that point, the husband was responsible for his bride and for the rearing of children, along with his wife, which was the nurturer and the trainer. If you take Abraham Lincoln, for example, his mother, because his father was a piece of dirt, she did more to help and develop that man than his father ever did. So there's a failure on his father's part. And I will say that men have failed in their God-given roles as leaders because they are abusive. They've been abusive of that role to women and all. And in history, you can see a lot of abuses, a lot of sin, but it doesn't change the fact that there is an order given while we're on this earth. And Jesus Christ does not change that, because a lot of people will point to, in the spirit, that there's no Greek, there's no, Hebrew, there's no Greek, there's no male, there's no female. In the spirit, that's absolutely right. God doesn't distinguish between that. But on this earth, it doesn't take away the positions, the order that God created until after we're dead. So that verse is misinterpreted to try to apply to today, which is removing the whole structuring of the Lord, the temporary structure, if you will, why people are on the earth. Now, I'm getting back to the dating of a daughter. Now, she was known as Miss, MSS. Back in the day, you had family members that would even accompany her on a date to make sure that the male didn't overstep his bounds and make unwanted advances. This was a whole idea of protecting the daughter. Then we get down to marriage. After the courtship had taken place, then the daughter was given by the father in her hand to her husband, and they became one flesh. They became, she would take the last name of her husband traditionally, and she would drop one of those S's and put the R in her name, known as Mrs., MRS. So she was called Mrs. Whatever, as opposed to Miss whatever. And she would drop her father's name and take her husband's name. Now, of course, with the women's movement and everything, this whole concept of putting Ms. in there to stop women from identifying as being a part of their husband was done. And I can totally understand why that has occurred. But I'm trying to make a historical documentary of the things that I've seen happen, and just within my lifetime. So now we have Ms. and we have hyphenated names, which is a cultural diversity thing. Probably found it in Spain, I would imagine. But anyway, so now we're into the point of the woman being married and her husband taking responsibility for her and providing for her and protecting her as the head of his household. This gets into the military roles of men traditionally. This is why men were called to be soldiers, because if we look at it in a biblical text, men were to be the providers for and the protectors of their household. Even as far as the Titanic, for instance, was women and children first. It was the man's responsibility to protect them and to provide for them. But these are archaic today. So you have the abbreviation, you have marriage, which is not even considered a sacred thing anymore. I mean, come on, how many girls shack up with their boyfriends before they get married. You got to try out the car before you marry it. That type of thinking. These things would be unheard of all the way back to the 1950s that are not unheard of today. Another thing is the church roles. Uh, in the church, if you remember in the 50s and before, women would wear a head covering in the church. This was reflective of God's order of man having authority over the woman in the church and the woman having her head covering. That's why you have women having their head coverings in church. Today, you have female pastors. We're co-equal. This idea of we're all one in the spirit of Jesus Christ. So we're co-equal. We're all created the same. Totally throws away God's order for this world. So I don't agree with that. I got to say that my mother is a lot better instructor, a lot better teacher than my father is in the Bible. She's a lot better read. She's a lot more capable, but that does not usurp my father's authority over her spiritually. This is a cultural change that comes about with the woman's movement. Let's see. So then I'm going to talk about defense. So in the defense roles today, we've in the United States, we've just come to the point where we're going to allow women in combat. We're all the same. We're all equal. Now, I got to say that there's, and I'll be the first to admit that there are women that are a lot more capable than I am as a man, a lot smarter than me. In fact, my wife outranked me in the Army, and we both did over 20 years. And I have no problem with working under a woman, with having a woman lead me, with even having a woman tell me what her scriptural views are, but still, it doesn't change the fact that in a Judeo-Christian way, that these roles are still to be followed. However, they're not followed. So we're going to have women in combat roles, co-equal with the man in the trench and all. This just spits in the face of the whole idea of men being the providers and the protectors of their nation and their families and so forth. But this is all done in the idea that we're all equal or co-equal, and it's 180 degrees apart from the traditional values that have been followed for centuries up until this last generation. Now, a lot of people will feel like maybe that's a good thing, and maybe it is. I don't know. Men have certainly not done a good job in this world, but I don't think that's because men have been in charge as opposed to women. I think that's because of sin. And so today I just wanted to give a little historical references to how things have changed just in my generation and where I believe the root of sexism comes from. God bless you. And I want to tell you, I have no animosity towards anybody that has a different view than me. I'm just trying to make this an historical record. Bye.